Welcome to another episode of Inquiring Minds. I am your co-host, Steve Harper, and with me, as always, is the amazing Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. Looking forward to this. It's going to be a deep dive into a great conversation.
Absolutely. And this one comes from a listener, a new fan of our podcast, actually. Her name is Sarah. I've actually known Sarah a little while. She followed me on social media. She came to me because we were having a conversation about a possible coaching relationship with her son, but that ended up being a conversation about the show and a topic that she'd like us to cover. And so I said, "What is that?" She said, "How do you regain your confidence after you've lost it?" And I thought, wow, that's a really good topic. And so I'm excited to jump in here because I know it's something that you've dealt with your clients. I, of course, have dealt with it with several of mine. And so I just think this one's going to be an interesting one to play with.
Oh, yeah. And, interestingly enough, as you said, I've been dealing with this with some clients of late who've had very successful careers. They've moved up in their careers. They know their craft inside and out. New boss comes in and totally demolishes them to the point where they don't know which end is up. They second
Yeah.
guess themselves and they end up leaving because the boss actually wants that. So rather than help them align to work that, would really be beneficial to them, they totally destroy them. And when they move, it takes a while for them to find their footing again in the new location.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is they might have had 25 years of successful career path, and one person destroys it for them.
Yep.
How does that happen? Like, I'm always amazed at that. So I look forward to having this conversation because one person does not define you.
Yep.
And often an organization will have a competition or they'll post something for a position. By the time they get around to hiring somebody, the organizational structure or mandate has changed. They bring
Yes.
somebody in for a job that no longer exists.
Yeah.
So, if they're supposed to consult and do a lot of interactive work, all of a sudden they're parked in front of a computer and it's not what they were brought in for. They can't be set up for success unless they're aligned to their traits and their personality. But I want to pass it on to you because I want to see what your experience is before we go to the question itself. How do we regain our self confidence? I'd love to hear what your experience has been.
Absolutely. Well, specifically around this situation, Sarah had been a manager, felt really good at what she was doing, felt like she had been doing a great job, got great reviews, had always sort of been in a situation where she felt like she really had great control, really great respect from the team that she was, that was working for her. And in her situation, she never saw this coming, but they let her go, and they just felt like they needed to move a different direction. And she thought she was hitting and checking all the boxes along the way without any kind of feedback. And it was a similar situation to, like you mentioned, where there was a new regime that came in above her, and they had a different way of approaching and looking at things. And I don't think, really, based on what I've learned, gave her much of a chance to really show what she was capable of. They were, I think, pretty hell bent on making the change. So, but for her, it was kind of a blow to the ego, right? And so she ended up getting hired very quickly with another company, similar type role, responsibility. But she really found herself second guessing everything she was doing, because she was like, here I am just going really well in this job and thinking I'm doing a great job. And there were all indications that that was the case. And then out of the left field, this comes and kind of hits me from out of the blue. And so it really made her start to have a crisis of confidence in how she was going to respond and react in the new role. And so I thought it was really interesting because, it is really about trying to figure out how to get back on that horse, but actually get that horse to go forward, at the end of the day. And so for her particular situation, it was an intriguing conversation, and of course she and I did talk specifically about, you have to trust your gut. You have to understand that they hired you for a very specific reason. The last job does not define this job, right? In fact, that experience can't be allowed to cloud what's happening with this new opportunity, and you have to find a way to kind of plug back into that confidence. But that was really where she was struggling, how to get back to that point where she felt like, okay, I'm back to doing what I was doing before, and maybe doing it, exactly the way, or maybe even a little better. But I have to be confident in my abilities carrying me forward, which is ultimately why these folks hired her.
So, what comes to my mind is she was hired for this new position, new organization, I would think.
Hmm.
And they hired her because of her track record, not because of one specific blip within that record. That's the first thing. The second thing is, apropos to what you said about her not getting any feedback saying that she wasn't doing a good job and all of a sudden she's let go. If you're not getting feedback, ask for it.
Yes.
Ask your boss, am I giving you what you need? Here's a few ideas that came to mind, and share your perspectives because they don't know what you're made of unless you share that.
Yes.
So share your perspectives, share what you're seeing, share what you think you should be seeing and you're not, and ask for feedback. Is this exactly what it is that you want to achieve? What I'm seeing effects. That's the first thing. The second
Yep.
thing is you connect with your colleagues. Your new colleagues know the organization. What do you need to pay attention to? What do you take for granted? But I don't know because I'm new here. So you ask those
Yeah.
questions to really, fill in those gaps for yourself. And then at the end of the day, keep a log. This
Yeah.
is what I accomplished today. And I was very proud of myself because for the first time I did X. So, what you're doing is you're actually keeping a log that you could refer back to. Then, when you get the feedback, add the snippets of feedback that you got from your manager to say, I'm on track here. They want me to, pull up my socks here. This is how I might do it. And to tell, then you keep your manager in the loop saying, you wanted me to pull my socks up here. This is what I'm doing to address it. So there's no gaps in the communication. And you're going to build something towards the future that you want to create rather than let one person write the story of your entire career,
Yeah.
which, if you're going to look at it that way and say, am I letting one person, one new regime define me? Like, seriously, I'm letting myself do that. No.
Yeah.
And just, draw a line in the sand.
I mean, those are excellent points, and I think really, will be well received by Sarah for sure about going in and early and often and recording what you're doing and those things that you're accomplishing, but then sitting down and having that conversation to make sure we're on track and we're fulfilling what those managers are looking for from her role, right, or her team, which I think is ideal in her circumstance. I think where her confidence really, kind of the confidence at crisis for her situation was at the prior job, she never saw any of that coming, and felt like she had a really good rapport with the management team. And as I was talking to her, it became obvious that this certainly wounded her emotionally. Right at the end of the day, it would any of us, right, when this situation happens, especially if you feel like you're doing a really good job. But it was really kind of a wholesale change to the management structure above her, including her direct manager, who she felt like had a really good, she had a really good rapport with. She felt fully supported. And what was amazing was that she actually took it upon herself when she was applying for the next role. This person was also, had been let go and has now landed with another company. But she actually reached out and said, would you mind being a reference to me? Because I think you can speak to my work ethic and my approach and how I managed my team. But it was funny. She used that as a, sort of a bridge to the new role to validate why she would be a good hire for this new organization. But yet she somehow didn't take that feedback from that manager to heart. And so we had a, pretty good conversation about that. You need to really pay attention to what they said and why they said it. And they played a key role in helping you land this new opportunity because they did feel you did such a great job. I think you were a victim of circumstance, had nothing really at the end of the day to do with you. But you have to start to build some of your confidence based on that feedback that they shared with your new employer. and she really hadn't actually taken that to heart. And so I think that that was a kind of a big turning point for her in terms of how she was starting to evaluate some of that. But the feedback that you just shared about, let's make sure we're not caught off guard with this new company. Let's ask for that feedback. Let's make sure we're having those open conversations, and showing your willingness to do so, I think, is a very, very big thing to really start to create that relationship with the higher ups.
You know what comes to mind? You know, when you go in for an interview and they're looking to see if you're a fit for the role, a fit for the organization, fit for the culture, fit for whatever, you want to tick off on a list. It works both ways. I
Yeah,
always tell people, interview the company, find out what the culture is like,
me too.
speak
Yeah,
to whoever you could get hold of to find out, are you treated well? You might not have been a fit for the new regime that came into your past organization. If
yeah,
that's the case, then would you want to literally go for a job in an organization that literally treats an individual the way you were treated? No feedback. Let's just get rid of her, kind of thing, and bring in the new.
yep,
So ask yourself that question. There are many different layers to this. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you look at it as a failure is just a stepping stone towards something else that's successful. And if you
absolutely.
don't fail, that you don't have that huge learning curve that comes with getting off to the other side of that failure. So this is actually, I know you're going to want to throw something at me, but it's make it soft. It's
I'm looking for
yeah,
something.
you're looking for something. I always say to people, what are you learning about yourself? Not the
Yeah,
organization and people. What are you learning about yourself? What is your threshold to start beating yourself up? And these are
yeah,
conversations that we're going to continue to have. So I would encourage you, Sarah, to keep tuning in, because I think we're going to continue this through different lenses. It's how we view ourselves. Sometimes it's having to let go of this to be able to move towards something else that might be so much better for us. This
yeah,
is your opportunity to do that. The more you second guess yourself, the less confident you will be, which can impact your professionalism. So look for, what is your desired end result. Make sure you're on the same page with your manager. Check in on a regular basis and let them know what your thoughts are and how you're
yep.
building towards it. And then you're going to look at yourself and say, whoa, I'm pretty special, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
That's what I'd like to see
absolutely.
you get.
Well, that's great advice. The other thing I would say for our audience is, there will be these situations. I think when we all think about that work feedback or a circumstance that maybe has arisen in our personal life where it's compromised our confidence, I think it's really good for you to like actually spend some time in those moments thinking about what they were, what they meant to you, how you've allowed that to continue to define yourself. So you write those out in a journal, kind of go through it. And what's funny is they seem super scary as you start to kind of bring back that emotion to how you attached that emotion to that circumstance. But then as you start to realize, what have I accomplished since then? How did I use that as a springboard to do something better? How did I use this to be a better manager or a better employee or just a better parent or whatever, right? At the end of the day, these things that come up actually can open up a whole plethora of learning opportunity. And I actually think by going back and kind of peeling that onion back a little bit and looking at it and saying, okay, well, maybe I could have done some things differently, or maybe I did and was doing everything I possibly could to be the best at whatever that might be. And but I let this person's comment or I let that person's circumstance affect me emotionally, affect my mojo, and which compromised my confidence. But now, 1 year or 2 years or 10 years after that thing has happened, going back to it, it's like, well, you know what? That was their opinion, or that was their feedback, or that was their perception at the time, but it didn't have to define me, which I think is another effort for you to be able to get back on that confidence horse and actually build yourself back up from that circumstance to realize that no, I'm not going to let it have that situation have the power over me that it seems to, and take that next step to be able to say, okay, good. Now, what could I do to make sure that I never put anybody else in that situation like they put me in, right? And be cognizant of how you manage or how you engage and communicate with the people that are important to you, either in work or, your personal life.
I'm thinking from a perspective of the manager and the management team.
Yep.
They bring in us to coach people, to get them up to snuff and all that, to help them become more of who they are. If
Yep.
we're in an organization that has a well-meaning, purpose for having coaching come in. As a last resort, coaching should never be that. But I'm going to park that for a moment. I like my message to the manager. If you want your people to succeed and respect you, then you need to have their backs. Having their backs mean to give them the feedback to course correct before it gets to the point of no return. If
Yes.
it's not in alignment, then if you have a position that would be a better alignment, see if you can move them there. Otherwise, help them transition out respectfully and with
Yes.
honor. That's the
Yes.
next thing. If you have a new manager come in, new executive, whatever, whose, goal in life is to demolish everybody under them to look bigger in your eyes, and you don't see what's going on, but you hear the grumblings, you don't deal with it, it's on you. It's not on the
Yes.
person who's eventually going to leave, because nobody deserves to be treated like that.
Yep.
So, you have to honor people for what their contribution is and help them make the highest and best contribution they can make. That is your job as a manager, as a leader, is to lead and manage your people. Don't leave it for another entity. Don't leave it for HR to fix the pieces, because HR is there for the company, not for the individual. And you really help people succeed. And lastly, ask yourself before every conversation, how do I want this person to feel after the conversation is over? Come
Yes.
supported, demolished, ridiculed. It's all in your court. So that is my 3 cents on that.
That's excellent. That's excellent advice. And I say you're not just the manager, and you're not there. You're there to also empower and be their champion. If you're a good manager, even if you have maybe an underperformer, like you said, you want to be as positive and forward thinking about what you need to do to take that corrective action to help them get to that next level. And when you do it, they'll be on the same side of the desk with you to say, I want to be here. I want to be a contributor. I may need to improve in these areas. But now, as a manager, you are legitimately becoming a full on leader at that juncture, right? Because at the end of
Yeah.
the day, you're helping them overcome some things that are maybe challenging to their career path, but you're helping them see where their blind spots are. You see some areas of improvement. You don't ridicule them for it, you don't make them feel horrible for it. You guide and direct and help. And managers, they bring, like you said, they bring us in as coaches to help, help organizations be better. But really, the coaching never stops, whether we're engaged or not. If we've done a good job, those managers become that coach, and they become that resource for that employee to learn what they can do better, and ultimately to shine a light on the things that they bring in, and what they do exceptionally well. And so I think that's kind of a key factor. Incidentally, the manager that ended up letting Sarah go, she doesn't even know if he's still with that company. And it's been a short window, right? Probably about 9 months. But at the end of the day, that sort of tells you something as well. And I told her, I said, don't look at it as kind of a knock on your resume, but look at it as a positive, because God, how horrible would it be to still be there if that's exactly what's allowed to happen and that's how they treat people? The new regime coming in clearly doesn't get it.
Yeah, there you go. So don't define yourself by somebody who you don't respect at that moment in time.
Absolutely. Well, as with all of our conversations, this has just been hugely beneficial. I think just even to me, I hope it is beneficial to you, Sarah, when you see this. And for all of our listeners and our audience on YouTube and Facebook, we appreciate, you participating with us, giving us these topics to chew on, to have these conversations. That's how this show gets better, and ultimately make sure that we're delivering content that you want to hear. And there's so many different, avenues that we could take this, but, nothing's more critical than the feedback that you give us, topics you'd like to hear, questions you'd like us to answer. And so we love that. Donna, just real quickly, how do folks get a hold of us if they want to offer up a suggestion for the show, maybe a topic or a question?
They could comment on our YouTube page for Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. Same thing for the same name Facebook group. If you don't feel comfortable writing publicly, then contact us through our websites. Steve could be found at ripplecentral.com. I'm at donnacarlin.com. Let us know what you want us to discuss. Let us know how this impacted you and whether or not it was beneficial. All this is a continuing conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And we are so grateful that you're tuning in, and we appreciate you more than we could ever, truly say. But Donna, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too. Have a good one.
All right, you too.